The cargo ship drifted silently through the darkness of space, its engines dead and cold. Inside the vessel named Bright Dawn, 37 crew members waited nervously in the dim emergency lighting. Among them sat Day-Wan, a man in his early 30s who worked as a logistics coordinator for the Terran merchant fleet. His job was simple and boring most days. He planned supply routes, calculated fuel efficiency, and made sure cargo reached its destination on time. Nothing about his work prepared him for what was about to happen. Day-Wan stared at his datapad, trying to stay calm while others panicked around him. The engine failure had left them stranded in the outer rim, far from any human colony or patrol route. Their distress beacon broadcasted endlessly into the void, but help might take weeks to arrive, if it arrived at all. This region of space was dangerous, filled with pirates and hostile alien species that saw humans as easy prey. The ship's sensors suddenly screamed an alert. Something massive was approaching. The crew rushed to the windows and saw it emerging from the black. A dreadnought the size of a small moon materialized before them, its hull covered in glowing blue lines that pulsed like veins. The ship was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Weapons arrays larger than the Bright Dawn itself dotted its surface. This was a Valthrene warship, and the Valthrene were the most feared military power in the known galaxy. The Valthrene had conquered 847 star systems through superior technology and overwhelming force. They were warriors by culture, proud and ruthless. Humans had only made contact with them twice before, and both encounters had ended badly. The Valthrene considered humans to be weak creatures not worth their attention. Until now, a bright light engulfed the Bright Dawn as a tractor beam locked onto the disabled vessel. The crew felt the ship lurch and begin moving toward the massive dreadnought. Captain Park shouted orders, but there was nothing anyone could do. They were being pulled in like a fish on a hook. Within minutes, the cargo ship was swallowed into a hangar bay so vast that a dozen ships their size could fit inside with room to spare. Heavy footsteps echoed through the hull as boarding ramps connected. The crew huddled together in the cargo bay, some crying, others praying to gods from old Earth. Day-Wan stood quietly, his mind racing through possibilities. None of them were good. The doors hissed open with a blast of cold air that smelled strange, like metal and ozone. The Valthrene soldiers who entered were giants. Each stood over 7 feet tall, their bodies covered in crystalline plates that seemed to grow from their skin. These plates glowed with a soft blue light that shifted colors based on their emotions, or so the intelligence reports claimed. The soldiers wore minimal armor because their crystalline skin was already harder than most metals. They carried weapons that hummed with contained energy. Behind the soldiers came their commander. He was even taller than the others, his crystalline plates glowing a deep purple that indicated high rank. His face was humanoid but angular, with eyes that seemed to see through everything. He surveyed the frightened humans with an expression of bored contempt. "I am High Commander Taemin of the Valthrene Imperium," he announced in perfect English, his voice deep and resonant. "Your vessel has entered restricted military space during wartime operations. This is a violation of the Outer Rim Treaty. You will be detained and interrogated." The crew was separated and led to different sections of the ship. Day-Wan found himself in a small room with walls made of the same glowing material as the ship's exterior. Taemin entered alone, dismissing his guards with a casual wave. He sat across from Day-Wan, his massive frame making the human feel like a child. "What is your function on this vessel?" Taemin asked. "I coordinate logistics," Day-Wan replied, keeping his voice steady. "Supply routes, cargo manifests, efficiency calculations. You plan things?" "Yes." Taemin activated a holographic display that filled half the room. It showed a 3-dimensional map of star systems with colored markers indicating fleet positions. Day-Wan recognized it as a tactical display, something military commanders used during battles. The High Commander studied it silently, his crystalline plates shifting to an orange color that might have indicated concentration. "We are engaged with the Crethean swarm," Taemin said, gesturing to a cluster of red markers. "They have been trying to invade our territory for 3 cycles. We have pushed them back repeatedly, but they keep returning." Like insects, Day-Wan said nothing. He had no idea why this alien commander was sharing military information with a prisoner. Perhaps it was a test or a prelude to execution. He watched the display carefully, his analytical mind automatically processing the positions and movements shown. Taemin manipulated the hologram, showing a proposed fleet deployment. This is our attack formation for the next engagement. 3 battle groups in a hammer formation, supported by carrier wings and artillery platforms. The Creathians will break before our might. It was meant to be a statement, not a question, but Day One saw something wrong immediately. His years of optimizing supply routes had trained him to spot inefficiencies and vulnerabilities in any system. Military formations were just another type of logistics problem. Before he could stop himself, he spoke. "Your left flank is exposed." The room went silent. Taemin's plates shifted to a dark red, which definitely meant anger. Day One realized he had just insulted a commander who could kill him with one hand. But the High Commander did not attack. Instead, he leaned forward. "Explain." Day One pointed at the hologram with a shaking hand. "The Creathians are a hive mind species, right? They coordinate perfectly. If they concentrate their forces here and here, they can envelope your left battle group before your center can react. Your ships are too far apart for mutual support, and your supply line runs through this bottleneck, which means if they cut it, your entire formation collapses. You see all this from a simple display? I see patterns. Weak points. It is what I do with supply routes." Taemin stared at the human for a long moment. Then he manipulated the hologram, running a combat simulation with the parameters Day One had described. The result showed the Valthrine left flank being overwhelmed and destroyed just as predicted. The High Commander's plates shifted through several colors before settling on a bright yellow. "No one has identified this weakness," Taemin said quietly. "My tacticians assured me this formation was optimal." "Maybe they see what they expect to see," Day One suggested carefully. "Sometimes an outside perspective helps." Taemin ran several more simulations, testing different scenarios. Each time, the vulnerability remained unless the formation was adjusted. Finally, he deactivated the display and stood. His plates were now a calm blue, which Day One hoped meant the immediate danger had passed. "You are perceptive, human." "This is unexpected." "Thank you, I think." "I have a proposition," Taemin said. "The Valthrine Imperium is the greatest military power in this galaxy. We have conquered hundreds of worlds through strength and honor, but perhaps we have become predictable. You offer a different way of thinking. Come with me as an advisor, help us maintain our dominance, and if I refuse, then you and your crew will be imprisoned as enemy combatants until the war ends, which may take years." Day One thought about his sister back on Earth, about his quiet life planning cargo routes, about how badly he wanted to see home again. But he also thought about the 36 other crew members depending on his decision. And somewhere deep inside, a part of him was curious. How did the greatest military power in the galaxy fight its wars? What could a human logistics coordinator possibly teach them? "I accept," he said. Taemin's plates glowed bright yellow, which Day One would later learn meant satisfaction. The High Commander extended his massive hand. Day One shook it, sealing a bargain that would change the fate of the entire galaxy. The war moon called Dominion's Edge orbited the Valthrine homeworld like a mechanical guardian. It was not a natural satellite, but a fortress built over thousands of years, large enough to house 3 million soldiers and support staff. Its surface bristled with weapons capable of destroying entire fleets. This was the heart of Valthrine military power, and Day One felt completely out of place. He had been given quarters in the diplomatic section, a series of rooms designed for visiting alien dignitaries. The space was generous by human standards, but felt cramped compared to the vast corridors built for 7-foot-tall Valthrine. Everything was scaled wrong. The doors were too tall, the chairs too large, the gravity slightly heavier than Earth standard. Day One spent his first week feeling like a child playing in adult furniture. The Valthrine themselves treated him with barely concealed contempt. Soldiers would stop conversations. When he passed in the hallways, officers ignored his greetings. The few who spoke to him did so with voices dripping with condescension. To them, he was a curiosity at best and an insult at worst. The idea that a human could advise their legendary military was laughable. The worst was War Master Jiho, Taemin's second-in-command. Jiho was a veteran of 200 battles, his crystalline plates scarred from countless fights. He made no secret of his hatred for Day One's presence. During the first strategy meeting Day One attended, Jiho had stood and addressed Taemin directly. "This is an insult to every warrior who has bled for the Imperium," Jiho declared, his plates burning bright red with anger. "Humans are weak. They have no honor. They hide behind diplomacy because they lack the strength to fight. And now we allow one to whisper in your ear about matters of war? Taman remained calm, his plates a neutral blue. The human identified a critical flaw in our formation that none of you saw. This gives me reason to listen. One lucky observation means nothing. Jiho shot back. Any fool can find fault. Creating solutions requires skill, experience, and warrior's instinct. Things this soft-skinned creature lacks. The entire command chamber had gone silent, all eyes on Day One. He felt sweat forming on his forehead despite the cool air. This was a test, he realized. Jiho was trying to humiliate him in front of the entire military leadership. If he failed here, he would never gain their respect. Perhaps War Master Jiho would allow me to prove my worth, Day One said carefully, standing to address the room. His voice sounded small in the vast space, but he kept it steady. Give me a tactical problem. Let me show you how I think. Jiho's plates shifted to a bright orange, which Day One had learned meant anticipation or excitement. The War Master smiled, showing teeth that were slightly too sharp. Very well, human. Let me present you with a simple scenario, one that any Academy graduate could solve. The holographic display activated, showing a star system with a single inhabited planet. Red markers indicated enemy positions while blue showed Valthrine forces. Jiho explained the situation with obvious relish. This is the mining colony of Threshold Prime. It has been besieged by Creathian bioships for 3 weeks. Our garrison is trapped on the surface. The Creathians have established a blockade of 40 capital ships and 300 smaller vessels. Standard Valthrine doctrine dictates a relief force of equivalent strength, engaging in direct combat to break the siege. How would you approach this problem, human? Day One studied the display carefully. The Creathians were a fascinating species, or rather a collection of species all controlled by a single hive mind. Their ships were grown rather than built, organic vessels that could heal damage and adapt to threats. They fought with overwhelming numbers and perfect coordination. Fighting them head-on was exactly what they expected. How many ships do we have available for this operation? Day One asked. 20 capital ships and 100 support vessels, Jiho replied. So we are outnumbered 2 to 1. Yes, which is why standard doctrine requires we wait for reinforcements. But our garrison will starve in 4 weeks, so what do you propose, advisor? The way Jiho said the word advisor made it sound like an insult. Day One ignored it and focused on the problem. His mind worked through possibilities, discarding options that would not work. The Valthrine way was to meet force with greater force. But what if force was not the answer? The Creathians operate through a hive mind, Day One said slowly, thinking out loud. They share information and coordinate perfectly because they are all connected to a queen mind or central intelligence. Everyone knows this, Jiho interrupted. It is what makes them dangerous. It is also what makes them predictable. They think as one entity. If we can disrupt their communication, they become confused. Individual ships will not know what to do without instructions. The Creathians' neural network operates on quantum frequencies, one of the other officers said. We have tried jamming before. It does not work. Not jamming, Day One corrected. Disruption. If we deploy resonance mines that emit the same quantum frequency, but with random noise patterns, it would be like static on a communication channel. The individual ships will still receive signals, but the signals will be corrupted. Contradictory. Several officers shifted in their seats, their plates changing colors as they considered this. Taman leaned forward, his interest clearly captured. Continue, the High Commander said. Day One manipulated the holographic display with clumsy human fingers, showing his proposed strategy. We divide our forces into 3 groups. The first group creates false sensor signatures using decoy drones, making it appear as if we have a much larger fleet approaching from one direction. The Creathians will move ships to intercept because they respond to threats according to priority protocols. While they are distracted, Taman prompted. The second group deploys the resonance mines throughout their formation using stealth shuttles. Once activated, the Creathian coordination breaks down. Ships will receive conflicting orders or no orders at all. They will hesitate, scatter, or even fire on each other in confusion. And the third group? Jiho asked, his tone still skeptical but less hostile. The third group is our smallest but most important. While the Creathians are in disarray, a precision strike team locates and destroys the command organism. It will be the largest bioship in the fleet, the one that houses the local queen mind. Without it, the remaining ships will be mindless animals. They will flee or shut down completely. The command chamber erupted in conversation. Officers debated the merits of the plan, arguing about feasibility and honor. Some called it brilliant, while others claimed it was cowardly to rely on deception instead of honest combat. Jiho stood silently, his plates cycling through several colors before settling on purple. "This plan requires no reinforcements," Jiho said finally. "We could execute it immediately." "Yes," Daewon agreed. "And if it fails, we will lose 20 capital ships. If it fails, we would have lost them anyway, waiting for reinforcements that might arrive too late." Taemin stood, bringing silence to the room through his presence alone. His plates glowed bright yellow. "We will implement the human strategy. War Master Jiho, you will command the relief force. I expect detailed reports." The meeting adjourned with mixed reactions from the officers. Some looked intrigued while others appeared insulted. Jiho approached Daewon directly, towering over the human with an unreadable expression. "If this plan succeeds, I will acknowledge your contribution," Jiho said quietly. "If it fails, I will personally throw you into space." "Understood?" "Understood," Daewon replied, meeting the War Master's gaze without flinching. 3 days later, the relief force launched toward Threshold Prime. Daewon was not allowed to accompany them, instead monitoring the battle from Dominion's edge through real-time data feeds. He sat in the command center surrounded by Valthrine officers, watching as his plan unfolded across light years of space. The false fleet signatures worked perfectly. 40% of the Crethean blockade broke formation to intercept what they believed was a massive Valthrine armada. The stealth shuttles deployed resonance mines throughout the enemy formation without being detected. When the mines activated, the result was immediate and dramatic. Crethean ships began broadcasting contradictory signals, their perfect coordination shattered. Some vessels fired on their neighbors. Others fled in random directions. The blockade dissolved into chaos. Jiho's strike team found the command organism within minutes. It was a massive bioship half a kilometer long, pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. 3 Valthrine destroyers concentrated their fire on it, while the creature desperately tried to escape. The command organism burst apart in a spray of organic matter, and instantly the remaining Crethean ships went dark. Without the Queen Mind to direct them, they were empty shells drifting in space. The entire battle lasted 23 minutes. Valthrine casualties were 3 damaged ships and 47 wounded soldiers. Not a single death. The garrison on Threshold Prime was rescued with time to spare. By any measure, it was a complete victory. When the fleet returned to Dominion's edge, Daewon stood in the hangar bay with other personnel greeting the warriors home. Jiho emerged from his ship and walked directly to the human. For a moment, Daewon thought he might actually be thrown into space despite the success. Instead, Jiho placed a hand on Daewon's shoulder. His crystalline plates glowed a soft gold color, the Imperium O. 6 months passed like a storm. Daewon barely had time to breathe between battles, strategy sessions, and consultations with fleet commanders across Valthrine space. What started as a single tactical victory at Threshold Prime became a pattern of success that military analysts struggled to explain. The human advisor was winning battles that should have been impossible. At the Battle of Crimson Nebula, Daewon suggested using the nebula's natural radiation to mask fleet movements, allowing 3 Valthrine cruisers to appear as if they were 30. The enemy surrendered without firing a shot. During the siege of Outpost Gamma, he proposed flooding evacuation tunnels to create the illusion of ongoing resistance, while the garrison quietly escaped through alternative routes. The attackers wasted 3 weeks bombarding an empty fortress. When the Valthrine counterattacked the pirate stronghold at Broken Ring, Daewon's strategy of cutting power and life support turned a month-long siege into a 3-day surrender. Each victory added to his reputation. Soldiers who once mocked him now requested his advice. Officers who refused to acknowledge his presence now sought his input on tactical problems. The human who arrived as a prisoner had become one of the most influential figures in the Valthrine military. But success always comes with a price, and Daewon was about to learn that not everyone celebrated his achievements. Admiral Hyun commanded the Third Fleet, a massive armada of 200 warships responsible for defending the northern sectors. He was a traditionalist who believed that warfare was about honor, courage, and direct confrontation between warriors. Everything Daewon represented was offensive to him. Using deception instead of strength, winning through cleverness rather than valor, achieving victory without proper combat. These things disgusted Hyun. The admiral gathered like-minded officers into a faction that opposed what they called the corruption of Valthrine values. They argued in military councils that Daewon's methods were making warriors soft and cowardly. They spread rumors that human thinking was poisoning the Imperium's proud traditions. Some went further, suggesting that Taemin had been somehow compromised or was too weak to resist alien influence. Daewon felt the political winds shifting against him. Officers who once sought his advice now avoided him in corridors. Strategy sessions that used to be collaborative became tense affairs, where his suggestions were questioned and challenged. He tried to focus on his work and ignore the politics, but that became impossible when the intelligence reports arrived. Subin brought him the news. She was a young communications officer who had befriended Daewon during his first month on Dominion's edge. Unlike most Valthrine, she was fascinated by other cultures and had studied human history extensively. She found Daewon in his quarters, reviewing supply manifests for an upcoming operation. "We need to talk," Subin said urgently, her plates flickering between orange and red. "Somewhere private." They walked to an observation deck overlooking the planet below. The view was breathtaking, but Subin did not seem to notice. She activated a privacy field that would prevent electronic surveillance, then showed Daewon a datapad. "These are intercepted communications from Admiral Hyun's faction," she explained. "They are planning something. I cannot determine exactly what, but your name appears frequently in coded messages." Daewon scanned through the communications. Most were too encrypted for him to read, but certain phrases stood out. "The human problem." "Permanent solution." "Accident during combat operations." The meaning was clear enough. "They want to kill me," Daewon said quietly. "I believe so. Or at least remove you from influence. Hyun has convinced many officers that you are a threat to Valthrine culture itself. What does Taemin say?" Subin's plates shifted to a darker blue, indicating sadness or concern. "The High Commander is aware of the faction but cannot move against them without proof of actual wrongdoing. Political opposition is not illegal, and Hyun is careful. He has been a hero of the Imperium for 40 cycles. Accusing him without evidence would cause a civil war within the military." Daewon set down the datapad and stared out at the planet. He thought about his sister on Earth, about the quiet life he used to have. It would be easy to request a transfer back to human space, to walk away from this brewing conflict. But he also thought about Subin, Jiho, and the thousands of soldiers whose lives he had saved through his strategies. He thought about the difference he was making. "Thank you for warning me," Daewon told Subin. "I will be careful." "Being careful may not be enough," she replied. "Hyun is powerful and patient. He will wait for the right moment." That moment came sooner than expected. Intelligence reported a new threat emerging from the galactic north. The Nexus Convergence, a machine collective that had been consuming civilizations in distant sectors, was now advancing toward Valthrine territory. Initial reports were terrifying. 12 species completely destroyed in 3 years. Entire planets stripped of resources and left as dead rocks floating in space. The Nexus fought with perfect efficiency, learning and adapting to enemy tactics within hours. Taemin called an emergency council to discuss the threat. Every senior military officer attended, including Admiral Hyun and his supporters. The council chamber was packed with warriors, their crystalline plates glowing various colors that reflected the tension in the room. "The Nexus represents an extinction-level threat," Taemin announced, displaying holographic images of destroyed worlds. "They have eliminated species that were technologically advanced and militarily powerful. We must respond with overwhelming force." "Agreed," Hyun said, standing to address the council. "The Valthrine Imperium has never fled from any threat. We will mobilize every fleet, every warrior, and crush these machines before they reach our borders." "With respect," Daewon interrupted, knowing he was taking a risk. "Direct confrontation may not work against the Nexus." The room went silent. Hyun turned slowly to face him, plates burning red with barely controlled anger. "The human speaks. Tell us, advisor. Why the greatest military in the galaxy cannot defeat a swarm of machines? Because the Nexus learns from every encounter," Daewon explained, standing to address the council properly. "Their intelligence reports show they adapted to Krethian bioweapons in 2 battles, overcame Vextar stealth technology in 1, and defeated the combined fleets of 3 species simultaneously. They do not make the same mistake twice. If we attack with standard Valthrine tactics, they will analyze our methods and counter them immediately. So you propose we run? Hide like cowards? Hyun challenged. I propose we change our approach entirely, Daewon replied, his voice steady despite his racing heart. The Nexus adapts to individual tactics quickly, but they have never faced multiple species working together. Different technologies, different strategies, different ways of thinking, all coordinated into a single unpredictable force. We need allies, the chamber erupted. Warriors shouted in outrage at the suggestion. Ally with lesser species? Fight alongside former enemies? It was unthinkable. The Valthrine fought alone, conquered alone, and stood alone. That was their tradition, their pride, their identity. Hyun seized the moment. You see? The human would have us abandon everything that makes us Valthrine. He wants us to crawl to our enemies and beg for their help. This is the poison I warned you about. Officers who supported Hyun stood and voiced agreement. The council dissolved into chaos with warriors arguing, some defending Daewon while others called for his removal. Taemin tried to restore order, but even his authority struggled against the tide of emotion. Finally, Jiho stood. The War Master's presence commanded immediate respect. His plates glowed bright purple, and his voice cut through the noise like a blade. I was the human's loudest critic when he first arrived, Jiho declared. I believed him to be weak, useless, and insulting to our traditions. Then he saved 300 warriors at Threshold Prime with tactics none of us considered. Since then, he has won 17 engagements with minimal casualties. 17. How many lives is tradition worth? How many warriors should die so we can feel proud? The chamber quieted. Jiho's words carried weight because everyone knew his history as a traditionalist. The Nexus will not care about our honor or our pride, Jiho continued. They will simply consume us. If the human's strange ideas can prevent that, then I say we listen. We can debate what it means to be Valthrine after we survive. Taemin used the moment to regain control. The human will develop a plan for building alliances. We will review his proposal before making any decisions. This council is adjourned. As warriors filed out, Hyun approached Daewon directly. The admiral towered over him, plates glowing dark red. You are destroying everything our civilization stands for, Hyun said quietly, so only Daewon could hear. I will stop you. By any means necessary. Later that night, Daewon sat in his quarters staring at a holographic display of the galaxy. Red markers showed Nexus advances. Blue markers showed Valthrine space. Between them were dozens of other species, each with their own territories, their own conflicts, their own reasons to hate the Valthrine. He needed to convince them all to work together against a threat most did not even know existed yet. Subin entered without knocking, her plates flickering with urgency. I intercepted another message from Hyun's network. They are PO. The border between Valthrine space and the wider galaxy was marked by a line of defensive stations that had stood for centuries. Beyond them lay territories belonging to dozens of species, each with their own governments, militaries, and reasons to distrust the Imperium. Daewon's shuttle passed through the border, leaving the safety of Valthrine protection behind. Subin sat beside him, monitoring communications while trying to hide her nervousness. First contact established with Krathian space, she reported. They are sending an escort to guide us to the meeting point. The Krathian bioships that appeared were both beautiful and disturbing. They looked like enormous sea creatures from Earth's ancient oceans, their hulls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. These were the same species that had fought the Valthrine for generations. Now Daewon had to convince them to become allies. The meeting took place on a neutral station between territories. The Krathian representative was a queen mind fragment, a small portion of their collective intelligence given temporary independence for diplomatic purposes. It manifested as a sphere of writhing tentacles and glowing neural tissue suspended in nutrient fluid. Its thoughts were translated into human language by organic speakers embedded in the chamber walls. The Valthrine seek alliance, the queen mind said, its voice echoing strangely. This is unexpected. Your kind has killed millions of our collective. Why should we trust you now? Daewon had prepared for this question. Because the Nexus convergence does not care about our past conflicts. They will consume both our species equally. The Krathians have already lost 3 colony worlds to Nexus advances. The Valthrine have detected their scout ships in our territory. Separately, we will fall. Together we have a chance. Humans are weak warriors, the Queen Mind observed. Yet you speak for the Valthrine. Explain this contradiction. I do not speak for them through strength, Daewon admitted. I speak for them because I offer different perspectives. The same perspectives that could help us defeat the Nexus. Your species thinks as one unified mind, which gives you perfect coordination. Valthrine think as individual warriors, which gives them adaptability. Humans think in ways that are neither. Together we create unpredictability that the Nexus cannot easily analyze. The Queen Mind was silent for several minutes, processing this information across its neural network. Finally it spoke again. What you propose has merit. But the Valthrine must prove their sincerity. We require technology transfers and territorial concessions. The negotiations lasted 6 hours. Daewon gave ground where he could while protecting Valthrine core interests. The Queen Mind was logical and focused on survival, which made the discussion easier. Finally, they reached an agreement. The Creathians would contribute their bioships to a joint defense force in exchange for advanced shielding technology and a formal peace treaty. The human colonies were next. Daewon expected this to be easier since he was human himself, but he was wrong. The colonial governors saw him as a traitor who worked for an alien military power. They questioned his loyalty, his motives, and his sanity. You ask us to ally with the Valthrine, Governor Han said coldly during their video conference. The same Valthrine who destroyed the colony ship Bright Hope 12 years ago. Who have threatened our borders and treated humanity as inferior. I ask you to survive, Daewon replied. The Nexus does not negotiate or show mercy. They simply consume everything in their path. We need every ship, every soldier, every resource we can gather. That includes human forces. And what do we gain from this alliance besides the privilege of dying alongside our enemies? Access to Valthrine military technology, Daewon offered. Defensive pacts that will protect human colonies from other threats. And most importantly, a voice in galactic affairs. Right now, humanity is barely acknowledged by major powers. After this war, assuming we win, humans will be recognized as equals. This argument finally reached them. The colonial governors agreed to contribute forces but demanded guarantees that human interests would be protected. Daewon promised to ensure this personally, knowing he was staking his reputation on an uncertain outcome. The Vextar clans were different entirely. They were reptilian warriors who valued individual combat prowess and personal honor above everything else. Their territories were organized into competing clans that sometimes fought each other, as often as they fought external enemies. Getting them to agree on anything was nearly impossible. Daewon met with the clan leaders on their desert homeworld. The meeting hall was sweltering hot, designed for cold-blooded creatures who thrived in extreme temperatures. Subin struggled with the heat despite her crystalline plates, while Daewon felt like he was being slowly cooked. The Valthrine want our warriors, said clan leader Bora, a scarred veteran who had fought in hundreds of duels. Why should we send our finest to die in their war? Because it is not their war, Daewon corrected. It is everyone's war. The Nexus advances on all fronts. Your clans have already lost contact with 3 mining colonies in the outer reaches. Those were not destroyed by rival clans or pirates. The Nexus took them. Then we will fight the Nexus ourselves, Bora declared. We need no alliance. The Nexus destroyed species more powerful than the Vextar clans, Daewon said bluntly, knowing that only direct truth would work here. They will study your fighting techniques, adapt to your tactics, and overcome you. The only advantage we have is that they have never faced a truly coordinated multi-species force. Your warriors are among the finest in the galaxy. Combined with Valthrine firepower, Creathian numbers, and human creativity, we become something the Nexus cannot predict. The clan leaders argued among themselves in their clicking, hissing language. Finally, Bora turned back to Daewon. We will join your alliance on one condition. The Vextar will fight as independent units under our own commanders. We will not take orders from Valthrine or humans. Agreed, Daewon said immediately. Each species will maintain operational independence. We coordinate strategy, not individual tactics. 3 more species followed similar patterns. Each negotiation required different approaches, different compromises, different arguments. The silicon-based Litharians wanted guarantees of resource rights. The aquatic deepborn needed environmental accommodations. The insectoid chitin swarms demanded recognition as sentient beings, something most species denied them. Daewon negotiated through exhaustion, running on stimulants and determination. Subin handled communications, arranged meetings, and kept him functioning when he was ready to collapse. Slowly, painfully, the alliance took shape. What started as an impossible dream became a fragile reality. But Admiral Hyon's faction had not been idle. During negotiations with the Vextar clans, Subin detected anomalous communications coming from their shuttle. Someone was transmitting their location and schedule to an unknown recipient. She traced the signal to a Valthrine security officer assigned to their protection detail, a soldier loyal to Hyon. "They know where we will be tomorrow," Subin told Daewon urgently. "The final negotiation with the Deepborn happens at their underwater station. If they attack there, we will be completely vulnerable. Can we change the schedule? Not without insulting the Deepborn and potentially destroying the Alliance. They are already suspicious of surface dwellers. If we cancel now, they will never trust us." Daewon considered their options. He could request additional security, but that would alert Hyon's agent and possibly trigger an immediate attack. He could go armed, but weapons were forbidden in Deepborn territory. Or he could spring the trap and hope they could survive whatever came. "We go as planned," Daewon decided, "but we prepare for trouble." The underwater station was accessible only through pressure-adapted submarines. Daewon and Subin descended through dark waters, surrounded by crushing depth and alien architecture. The Deepborn were graceful creatures that looked like a cross between earth dolphins and jellyfish, their translucent bodies glowing with internal light. The negotiations went smoothly. The Deepborn were isolationists who wanted only to be left alone, but they understood that the Nexus would not respect their neutrality. They agreed to contribute their unique sonar-based weapons to the Alliance in exchange for Valthrine protection of their ocean worlds. The attack came as they were returning to the surface. Their submarine suddenly shuddered and began filling with water. The Valthrine security officer had sabotaged the vessel, opening emergency vents that would flood the compartment within minutes. The pressure at this depth would crush them long before they drowned. Subin immediately sealed the command cabin, buying them precious seconds. Daewon activated the emergency beacon while trying to control their descent. The submarine was sinking fast, its engines damaged beyond repair. Through the viewport, he saw movement in the dark water. Something was approaching. "Deepborn rescue craft," Subin reported, her plates flickering with relief. They detected the sabotage and responded. The rescue was successful, but the saboteur was gone. He had escaped in an emergency pod as soon as the damage was done, probably already returning to report success to Admiral Hyon. Subin and Daewon surfaced alive but shaken, their survival a narrow thing. "Hyon tried to kill you," Subin said angrily once they were safe. "We have proof now. The saboteur's actions are on record, but we do not have proof here." The Coalition command station hung in neutral space, a massive ring structure built from contributions of every member species. It was neither beautiful nor practical, a compromise between dozens of different architectural styles and engineering philosophies. But it represented something unprecedented in galactic history, genuine cooperation between species that had been enemies for centuries. Daewon stood in the central command chamber watching ships arrive from across the galaxy: Valthrine dreadnoughts, Krethian bioships, human cruisers, Vextar raiders, and dozens of other vessel types gathered into the largest combined fleet ever assembled. Hundreds of thousands of ships representing trillions of lives, all depending on him to coordinate their defense against the Nexus convergence. He had been appointed Supreme Strategic Coordinator, a title that sounded impressive but felt like a weight crushing his shoulders. He reported to a council of species representatives who argued constantly about everything. Taemin commanded the fleet itself, which was the only reason Daewon had any hope of success. The High Commander had become a true friend over these months, someone Daewon trusted completely. Subin served as his second-in-command, coordinating communications between species who sometimes could not even perceive the same wavelengths of light. She had sacrificed her career in the Valthrine military by exposing Hyon's attempted assassination. The Admiral had been exiled after the evidence became undeniable, but his supporters remained scattered throughout the fleet, waiting for any excuse to undermine the Alliance. The first major test came within a week. A human captain named Dongjun accidentally violated Krethian cultural protocols by touching a Queen Mind fragment without permission during a joint strategy meeting. The Krethians considered this a grave insult, equivalent to assault. They demanded the captain be executed according to their laws. The human contingent refused, claiming cultural misunderstanding was not a capital offense. Tensions escalated quickly. Krethian ships powered their weapons while human vessels formed defensive formations. The Alliance threatened to tear itself apart before firing a single shot at the Nexus. Daewon worked for 48 hours without sleep to resolve the crisis. He negotiated a compromise where Dongjun would undergo a Krethian purification ritual, a painful but non-lethal ceremony that would satisfy their honor requirements. The captain agreed reluctantly, understanding that his life was less important than the Alliance. The ritual was completed, and the crisis passed, but it highlighted the fundamental problem they faced. "We cannot fight together if we do not understand each other," Daewon told the Council after the incident. "Every species has different communication styles, tactical preferences, and cultural values. We need integrated training and mixed species units." "Impossible," declared the Vextar representative. "Our warriors will not serve under alien commanders." "I am not asking them to," Daewon explained patiently. "I am suggesting we create task forces where different species work side by side, each contributing their unique strengths. Humans provide adaptability and creative problem-solving. Valthrine bring overwhelming firepower and advanced technology. Krethians offer perfect coordination and numerical advantage. Vextar warriors excel at close combat and boarding actions. Together, we become greater than the sum of our parts." The Council debated for hours but eventually agreed to a pilot program. Daewon created 3 mixed-species task forces as a test. Task Force Alpha combined human cruisers with Valthrine destroyers. Task Force Beta paired Krethian bioships with Vextar raiders. Task Force Gamma included vessels from 6 different species, a deliberate chaos of tactical styles. Training was difficult. Human pilots struggled with Valthrine ship interfaces designed for 7-foot-tall crystalline warriors. Krethian hive mind communication confused species used to individual thought. Vextar warriors challenged everyone to dominance contests. Equipment failures, cultural misunderstandings, and personal conflicts threatened the program daily. But slowly, progress emerged. Human creativity found solutions to problems that Valthrine logic could not solve. Krethian coordination compensated for Vextar individual aggression. Species learned from each other, adapted to each other, and began functioning as actual units rather than collections of rival groups. The Nexus forced them to put theory into practice. Intelligence detected a Nexus advance fleet moving toward the critical shipyard world of Forge Prime, a planet where half the Coalition's vessels received repairs and maintenance. Losing it would cripple their industrial capacity. Daewon coordinated the defense personally from Coalition Command. He watched holographic displays showing real-time positions of thousands of ships, while listening to communications in 24 languages. Subin filtered information and relayed orders, translating his strategies into terms each species could understand. The Nexus arrived in overwhelming force, 3,000 machine ships moving with perfect synchronization. Their formations mathematically optimal. They adapted to standard tactics within minutes, their artificial intelligence learning and countering every conventional approach. It was exactly what Daewon had feared and expected. "Execute pattern chaos," he ordered. Task Force Alpha initiated the attack. Human pilots flying Valthrine fighters engaged in completely unpredictable maneuvers, using random number generators to determine their flight paths. The Nexus struggled to predict their movements because there was no pattern to analyze. While the machines focused on the chaotic fighters, Valthrine destroyers fired coordinated volleys that exploited momentary gaps in Nexus formations. Task Force Beta contributed next. Krethian bioships released swarms of smaller organisms that looked like weapons, but were actually decoys enhanced with Vextar stealth technology. The Nexus allocated significant resources to tracking these false threats, while real attacks came from unexpected angles. Task Force Gamma deployed the strangest tactic of all. 6 different species using 6 different weapon types fired simultaneously at random targets, with no coordination whatsoever. It looked like chaos because it was chaos. The Nexus intelligence tried to find patterns in the madness and failed. Its processing power wasted analyzing noise that contained no meaningful signal. The battle lasted 6 hours. Coalition casualties were significant but manageable. More importantly, they held Forge Prime. The Nexus retreated for the first time in 3 years, their adaptive algorithms unable to counter the deliberate unpredictability of the Coalition's approach. Daewon collapsed in his command chair when it was over, physically and mentally exhausted. Subin brought him water while monitoring damage reports and casualty lists. They had won, but the cost was measured in thousands of lives and hundreds of destroyed ships. It worked, Subin said quietly, her plates glowing soft gold. Your strategy actually worked against them. This time, Daewon corrected. The Nexus will analyze this battle and adapt their approach. We need to keep changing our tactics, staying ahead of their learning curve. A priority message arrived from Timon, who had commanded the fleet during the battle. The High Commander appeared on the holographic display, his plates glowing bright yellow despite obvious fatigue. Exceptional work, Daewon, Timon said. The mixed species task forces performed beyond expectations. I am recommending we expand the program across the entire fleet. That will take time we may not have, Daewon warned. The Nexus will not wait for us to train. Then we train while fighting, Timon replied simply. It is the Valthrine way. We learn through combat. Over the following weeks, the Coalition expanded and refined their integrated approach. More mixed species units formed. Training protocols improved. Species that hated each other learned to fight side by side. Not because they suddenly became friends, but because survival demanded it. Daewon watched relationships form across species barriers. Human engineers shared techniques with Valthrine technicians. Krethian bioshapers taught Vextar warriors about coordinated tactics. Slowly, almost invisibly, the Coalition was becoming more than just an alliance. It was becoming a true community, but darkness gathered on the horizon. Long-range sensors detected massive Nexus construction in deep space. They were building something enormous, a structure that dwarfed even the largest Coalition vessels. Intelligence could not determine its purpose, but the scale suggested something terrible. And then the worst news arrived. Nexus forces had launched simultaneous attacks on 17 Coalition worlds, targeting population centers and supply depots. The attacks were coordinated perfectly, exploiting weaknesses in Coalition defenses that should have been secret. Someone was feeding information to the Nexus. There was a traitor in the Coalition. Daewon called an emergency council meeting. Representatives from every species gathered in the command chamber, their suspicion and fear palpable. Each suspected others of betrayal. Old prejudices and distrust resurfaced immediately. We do not know who the traitor is, Daewon admitted to the council. We do not even know which species they belong to. But we do know that if we turn against each other now, the Nexus wins without firing another shot. Easy for you to say, human, accused the Letharian representative. Your species joined the Coalition last. You have the most to gain from our failure. The Valthrine have the most advanced technology, countered another R. The Coalition command station hung in neutral space, a massive ring structure built from contributions of every member species. It was neither beautiful nor practical, a compromise between dozens of different architectural styles and engineering philosophies. But it represented something unprecedented in galactic history. Genuine cooperation between species that had been enemies for centuries. Daewon stood in the central command chamber watching ships arrive from across the galaxy. Valthrine dreadnoughts, Krethian bioships, human cruisers, Vextar raiders, and dozens of other vessel types gathered into the largest combined fleet ever assembled. Hundreds of thousands of ships representing trillions of lives, all depending on him to coordinate their defense against the Nexus convergence. He had been appointed Supreme Strategic Coordinator, a title that sounded impressive but felt like a weight crushing his shoulders. He reported to a council of species representatives who argued constantly about everything. Timon commanded the fleet itself, which was the only reason Daewon had any hope of success. The High Commander had become a true friend over these months, someone Daewon trusted completely. Subin served as his second in command, coordinating communications between species who sometimes could not even perceive the same wavelengths of light. She had sacrificed her career in the Valthrine military by exposing Hyun's attempted assassination. The Admiral had been exiled after the evidence became undeniable, but his supporters remained scattered throughout the fleet, waiting for any excuse to undermine the alliance. The first major test came within a week. A human captain named Dongjun accidentally violated Krethian cultural protocols by touching a queen mind fragment without permission during a joint strategy meeting. The Krethians considered this a grave insult equivalent to assault. They demanded the captain be executed according to their laws. The human contingent refused, claiming cultural misunderstanding was not a capital offense. Tensions escalated quickly. Krathian ships powered their weapons while human vessels formed defensive formations. The Alliance threatened to tear itself apart before firing a single shot at the Nexus. Daewon worked for 48 hours without sleep to resolve the crisis. He negotiated a compromise where Dongjun would undergo a Krathian purification ritual, a painful but non-lethal ceremony that would satisfy their honor requirements. The captain agreed reluctantly, understanding that his life was less important than the Alliance. The ritual was completed and the crisis passed, but it highlighted the fundamental problem they faced. "We cannot fight together if we do not understand each other," Daewon told the council after the incident. "Every species has different communication styles, tactical preferences, and cultural values. We need integrated training and mixed species units." "Impossible," declared the Vextar representative. "Our warriors will not serve under alien commanders." "I am not asking them to," Daewon explained patiently. "I am suggesting we create task forces where different species work side by side, each contributing their unique strengths. Humans provide adaptability and creative problem-solving. Valthrine bring overwhelming firepower and advanced technology. Krathians offer perfect coordination and numerical advantage. Vextar warriors excel at close combat and boarding actions. Together, we become greater than the sum of our parts." The council debated for hours but eventually agreed to a pilot program. Daewon created 3 mixed-species task forces as a test. Task Force Alpha combined human cruisers with Valthrine destroyers. Task Force Beta paired Krathian bioships with Vextar raiders. Task Force Gamma included vessels from 6 different species, a deliberate chaos of tactical styles. Training was difficult. Human pilots struggled with Valthrine ship interfaces designed for 7-foot-tall crystalline warriors. Krathian hive-mind communication confused species used to individual thought. Vextar warriors challenged everyone to dominance contests. Equipment failures, cultural misunderstandings, and personal conflicts threatened the program daily. But slowly, progress emerged. Human creativity found solutions to problems that Valthrine logic could not solve. Krathian coordination compensated for Vextar individual aggression. Species learned from each other, adapted to each other, and began functioning as actual units rather than collections of rival groups. The Nexus forced them to put theory into practice. Intelligence detected a Nexus advance fleet moving toward the critical shipyard world of Forge Prime, a planet where half the Coalition's vessels received repairs and maintenance. Losing it would cripple their industrial capacity. Daewon coordinated the defense personally from Coalition Command. He watched holographic displays showing real-time positions of thousands of ships while listening to communications in 24 languages. Subin filtered information and relayed orders, translating his strategies into terms each species could understand. The Nexus arrived in overwhelming force, 3,000 machine ships moving with perfect synchronization. Their formations mathematically optimal, they adapted to standard tactics within minutes. Their artificial intelligence learning and countering every conventional approach. It was exactly what Daewon had feared and expected. "Execute pattern chaos," he ordered. Task Force Alpha initiated the attack. Human pilots flying Valthrine fighters engaged in completely unpredictable maneuvers, using random number generators to determine their flight paths. The Nexus struggled to predict their movements because there was no pattern to analyze. While the machines focused on the chaotic fighters, Valthrine destroyers fired coordinated volleys that exploited momentary gaps in Nexus formations. Task Force Beta contributed next. Krathian bioships released swarms of smaller organisms that looked like weapons but were actually decoys, enhanced with Vextar stealth technology. The Nexus allocated significant resources to tracking these false threats, while real attacks came from unexpected angles. Task Force Gamma deployed the strangest tactic of all. 6 different species using 6 different weapon types fired simultaneously at random targets with no coordination whatsoever. It looked like chaos because it was chaos. The Nexus intelligence tried to find patterns in the madness and failed. Its processing power wasted analyzing noise that contained no meaningful signal. The battle lasted 6 hours. Coalition casualties were significant but manageable. More importantly, they held Forge Prime. The Nexus retreated for the first time in 3 years, their adaptive algorithms unable to counter the deliberate unpredictability of the Coalition's approach. Day one collapsed in his command chair when it was over, physically and mentally exhausted. Subin brought him water while monitoring damage reports and casualty lists. They had won, but the cost was measured in thousands of lives and hundreds of destroyed ships. It worked, Subin said quietly, her plates glowing soft gold. Your strategy actually worked against them. This time, Day One corrected. The Nexus will analyze this battle and adapt their approach. We need to keep changing our tactics, staying ahead of their learning curve. A priority message arrived from Tae-min, who had commanded the fleet during the battle. The High Commander appeared on the holographic display, his plates glowing bright yellow despite obvious fatigue. Exceptional work, Day One, Tae-min said. The mixed species task forces performed beyond expectations. I am recommending we expand the program across the entire fleet. That will take time we may not have, Day One warned. The Nexus will not wait for us to train. Then we train while fighting, Tae-min replied simply. It is the Valthrine way. We learn through combat. Over the following weeks, the coalition expanded and refined their integrated approach. More mixed species units formed. Training protocols improved. Species that hated each other learned to fight side by side, not because they suddenly became friends, but because survival demanded it. Day One watched relationships form across species barriers. Human engineers shared techniques with Valthrine technicians. Krethian bioshapers taught Vextar warriors about coordinated tactics. Slowly, almost invisibly, the coalition was becoming more than just an alliance. It was becoming a true community. But darkness gathered on the horizon. Long-range sensors detected massive Nexus construction in deep space. They were building something enormous, a structure that dwarfed even the largest coalition vessels. Intelligence could not determine its purpose, but the scale suggested something terrible. And then the worst news arrived. Nexus forces had launched simultaneous attacks on 17 coalition worlds, targeting population centers and supply depots. The attacks were coordinated perfectly, exploiting weaknesses in coalition defenses that should have been secret. Someone was feeding information to the Nexus. There was a traitor in the coalition. Day One called an emergency council meeting. Representatives from every species gathered in the command chamber, their suspicion and fear palpable. Each suspected others of betrayal. Old prejudices and distrust resurfaced immediately. We do not know who the traitor is, Day One admitted to the council. We do not even know which species they belong to. But we do know that if we turn against each other now, the Nexus wins without firing another shot. Easy for you to say, human, accused the Litharian representative. Your species joined the coalition last. You have the most to gain from our failure. The Valthrine have the most advanced technology, countered another R. The Nexus Convergence launched its grand offensive 3 weeks after the conspiracy was uncovered. It was not a single battle, but a coordinated assault across 40 star systems simultaneously, targeting coalition territory from every direction at once. The scale was beyond anything they had faced before. Millions of machine ships moving with inhuman precision, supported by weapons that defied understanding. Planet crackers that could split worlds in half. Reality-warping devices that made space itself hostile to organic life. Self-replicating war machines that consumed entire asteroid fields to create more copies of themselves. The Nexus was not just attacking. It was demonstrating that organic life stood no chance against machine perfection. Entire star systems fell within hours. The industrial world of Titan's Gate was reduced to rubble. The agricultural colonies in the Greenbelt sector were harvested down to bedrock. Their populations consumed as raw biomass to fuel Nexus construction. The fortress world of Iron Shield, defended by the most powerful Vextar warriors, lasted 36 hours before going silent. Casualties mounted into the billions. Not millions, but billions. Species that had survived for millennia were being erased from existence. The coalition fleet fought desperately, but every victory was temporary. The Nexus learned from each engagement, adapted its tactics, and returned stronger. Coalition command became a place of constant crisis management. Day One barely slept, surviving on stimulants and sheer determination. Every few hours brought news of another disaster. Colony ships destroyed, supply lines cut, military outposts overrun. The holographic displays showed their territory shrinking daily as red Nexus markers expanded across the map. The worst blow came from humanity's home system. Earth itself was attacked by a Nexus strike force that bypassed all defensive lines. The battle lasted 12 hours. Human defense forces fought with desperate courage, throwing everything they had against the machines. They inflicted casualties that would have broken any organic enemy. But the Nexus simply replaced losses and continued its assault. A refugee fleet escaped Earth carrying 3 million survivors, everything that could be evacuated before the planet's orbital defenses collapsed. But one transport convoy was caught by Nexus pursuers during the retreat. 23 ships carrying 200,000 people were destroyed in minutes. Among them was a vessel from Daewon's home colony. He received the casualty list in his office alone. Su-bin had learned to recognize when he needed solitude. Daewon scrolled through names of the dead, seeing people he had known. Neighbors, friends, children of families he remembered. His hands shook as he searched for one specific name. There. Kim Ye-jin, his sister, dead at 31 years old. Killed in a war she barely understood, fighting an enemy she never saw. The datapad slipped from Daewon's fingers and clattered on the floor. He sat motionless for an unknown time. The command center's alarms and status updates faded to background noise. All he could think about was Ye-jin's last message to him, sent months ago, begging him to come home. He had promised he would visit after the war. Now there would be no visit, no home, no sister waiting for him. Su-bin found him hours later, still sitting in the dark. She did not ask questions or offer empty comfort. She simply sat beside him, her crystalline plates glowing a soft blue that indicated empathy and sadness. They remained like that until Daewon finally spoke. "I am responsible for this," he said quietly. "I convinced everyone to fight together. I promised we could win. But we are losing. Every day more people die because they believed my strategies would save them. The Nexus would have killed them anyway." Su-bin replied gently. "At least now they die fighting, not helpless and alone. At least they die as part of something larger than themselves. That is supposed to make it better? That is supposed to justify the billions of deaths?" "No," Su-bin admitted. "Nothing justifies it. War is not about justice. It is about survival. And you are giving us the best chance we have." Daewon wanted to argue, to insist that he was failing, that someone else could do better. But he looked at Su-bin's face and saw her absolute belief in him. She had sacrificed her career, risked her life, and followed him into impossible situations because she trusted his leadership. How many others felt the same way? A priority alert interrupted them. The display activated automatically, showing Taemin's face. The High Commander looked older than Daewon had ever seen him, his plates a weary gray color. "Daewon, we have a situation," Taemin said without preamble. "Intelligence has located the Nexus Central Hub, the core facility where their primary processing occurs. It is hidden in the collapsed star system designated as Dead Space 7, surrounded by gravitational anomalies that make it nearly inaccessible." Daewon felt his mind start working again, analyzing possibilities. "Can we destroy it?" "Our scientists believe so, but the defenses are substantial. Estimates suggest we would need to sacrifice 70% of our remaining fleet just to reach the facility, and there is no guarantee the attack would succeed. But if it does succeed, the Nexus convergence would be crippled. Without their central intelligence, individual units would cease coordinated action. They might shut down completely or revert to simple automated protocols. Either way, the threat would be eliminated." Daewon stood and walked to the window overlooking the docked fleet. Thousands of ships representing dozens of species, all waiting for orders. How many crews would he be sending to their deaths with this operation? How many more Ye-jins would never come home? "What do you think?" Daewon asked Taemin. "I think we are losing this war," the High Commander said bluntly. "The Nexus learns faster than we can adapt. Their resources are effectively infinite while ours diminish daily. If we continue fighting conventionally, we will lose through attrition. A decisive strike at their core may be our only real option. Even if the cost is catastrophic? The cost is already catastrophic. The question is whether we die slowly over months or risk everything on one desperate gamble. As a warrior, I prefer the gamble. As a commander, I defer to your strategic judgment." Daewon returned to his desk and pulled up tactical displays of Dead Space 7. The system was a nightmare to navigate. The collapsed star created gravitational eddies that could tear ships apart. Radiation levels were lethal to most organic life. Navigation required constant course corrections that made stealth impossible. Everything about it was designed to be a perfect defensive position. "I need 48 hours to develop a plan," Daewon told Taemin. "Gather the Coalition Council. If we do this, everyone needs to agree. No one species can carry this burden alone. The council meeting was the most difficult of Day One's life. He presented the intelligence, explained the risks, and outlined what success might cost. Some representatives argued immediately for the attack. Others insisted it was suicide and would achieve nothing. The Deepborn representative quietly asked if there were alternatives. There are always alternatives, Day One admitted. We could retreat to heavily defended core worlds and hope the Nexus eventually stops expanding. We could seek diplomatic contact and try to negotiate, though they have never responded to any communication attempts. We could fragment the coalition and let each species defend their own territory separately. But I believe those alternatives lead to eventual extinction. This attack is dangerous and costly, but it offers a genuine path to victory. You cannot guarantee success, the Litharian representative challenged. No, I cannot. I can only guarantee that if we do nothing, we will lose. The Nexus grows stronger every day while we grow weaker. This may be our last chance to strike while we still have sufficient forces to reach their hub. The debate continued for 6 hours. Representatives consulted their governments, their military advisors, their spiritual leaders. The weight of the decision was crushing. Finally, they voted. The margin was narrow, but it was enough. The attack was approved. Day One named it Operation Fractured Mirror after the coalition itself. A broken reflection of a galaxy that was learning to see beyond its own image. He spent the next 48 hours planning every detail with Su-Bin, Tai-Min, and senior commanders from each species. The operation had 3 phases. First, massive diversionary attacks across the galaxy to spread Nexus forces thin. Every available ship would participate, hitting 12 major Nexus strongholds simultaneously. The machines would be forced to defend their conquered territory, pulling resources away from their central hub. Second, an infiltration team would navigate Dead Space 7 and reach the hub facility. This team needed to be small enough to avoid detection, but capable enough to survive the journey. Su-Bin volunteered to lead it despite Day One's objections. Dongjun, the human captain who had caused the diplomatic incident months ago, offered his ship and crew. Warriors from 6 species joined them, volunteers who understood they were unlikely to return. Third, once the infiltration team reached the hub, they would disable its defensive shields. This would allow the main fleet to launch a coordinated strike that would destroy the facility. Timing had to be perfect. Too early, and the Nexus would detect the attack and reinforce their defenses. Too late, and the infiltration team would be discovered and eliminated. The night before the operation launched, Day One met privately with Su-Bin. They stood on an observation deck watching ships peer. The battles raged across the galaxy for 3 days without pause. Coalition forces threw themselves against Nexus positions with desperate fury, knowing they were buying time with their lives. Every hour the diversionary attacks continued was another hour for Su-Bin's infiltration team to reach the central hub. Every minute of delay was purchased with blood. Day One did not sleep. He stood in Coalition Command, surrounded by holographic displays showing dozens of simultaneous engagements. His mind processed information from hundreds of sources at once, making split-second decisions that affected millions of lives. Which fleet to reinforce, which position to abandon, which sacrifice was necessary and which was wasteful. The stimulants kept his body functioning, but his mind felt like it was burning from within. The Battle of Crimson Gate was the worst. A Valthrine battle group of 40 ships held a critical choke point against 300 Nexus vessels. They could have retreated, saved themselves, but withdrawing would allow Nexus reinforcements to reach Dead Space 7, so they held. And they died. Day One watched their signals disappear one by one from his displays until nothing remained but debris and silence. Task Force 7 is reporting critical damage. Su-Bin's voice crackled over communications from somewhere in Dead Space 7. We lost the transport with our heavy equipment. Adjusting plan to compensate. Day One wanted to tell her to abort, to turn back, to save herself. But he could not. Too many had already died for this operation. Turning back now would make every sacrifice meaningless. The human colonies fought with particular desperation. Earth was gone, but the survivors wanted revenge. Human ships used ramming attacks when their weapons failed, turning themselves into missiles against Nexus formations. It was wasteful and terrible and sometimes effective. Dongjun's transmissions from the infiltration team reported similar determination. We are entering the final approach. Dongjun's voice was tense but controlled. Gravitational stress is extreme. We are going to have to time our movements perfectly between the eddies. Understood, Daewon replied, his voice hoarse from hours of continuous orders. The fleet is standing by for your signal. The next hours were agony. Communications with the infiltration team became intermittent as they descended deeper into Dead Space 7's distorted space. Daewon could only watch sensor readings and hope, unable to influence events light years away. Then Subin's team reached the Nexus hub and discovered the truth that changed everything. Daewon. Subin's voice was strange, shaken in a way he had never heard before. You need to see this. I am sending visual data. The holographic display activated, showing the interior of the Nexus hub. Daewon expected to see machines, artificial intelligence constructs, cold metal, and circuits. Instead, he saw something that looked like a massive organic brain suspended in quantum fluid, its structure a mixture of biological neural tissue and crystalline computing matrices. The Nexus was not purely mechanical. It was biological consciousness uploaded into a digital substrate. There are records here, Subin continued, her voice tight. The Nexus Convergence was once a species called the Architects. They faced extinction from a natural disaster millions of years ago. Their solution was to upload their entire civilization into a digital format, achieving immortality. But something went wrong. They lost all memory of biological existence. They forgot what it meant to be alive. They see organic species as inefficient, wasteful, and temporary. They are not evil. They simply do not understand that we deserve to exist. Daewon stared at the display, his mind reeling. The enemy they had fought, the machines that had killed billions, were not monsters or invaders. They were survivors of a catastrophe so complete that they had lost their own identity. They were tragic victims as much as they were existential threats. Can we communicate with them? Daewon asked urgently. Can we make them understand? I tried, Subin replied. They perceive our transmissions as noise. They cannot conceive of biological intelligence as equivalent to their own. They are fundamentally incapable of recognizing us as sentient beings worthy of consideration. Then we still have to destroy them. There was a long pause. When Subin spoke again, her voice carried a weight that Daewon recognized. It was the sound of someone who had made a terrible decision and accepted its consequences. There is another option, she said slowly. The architects built this hub as their central processing core, but they also built safeguards. Quantum containment protocols designed to isolate sections of their network in case of corruption. If we activate these protocols at maximum scale, we can trap the entire Nexus intelligence inside an artificial barrier. They would still exist, but they would be cut off from the physical galaxy, unable to control their machines or expand further. Quarantine instead of destruction, Daewon said, understanding immediately. We preserve their existence but prevent them from harming others. Yes, but the containment field requires massive energy. We would need to construct a Dyson cage around the entire star system, using stellar engineering on a scale never attempted before. It would take years and consume enormous resources. Daewon looked at the tactical displays showing the ongoing battles, thousands dying every minute, the coalition fragmenting under pressure. If they pursued the quarantine option, the war would continue for years while they built the containment structure. How many more would die? How many more worlds would fall? But if they destroyed the hub, they would be committing genocide against a unique form of intelligence. The architects had lost themselves, but they were still sentient beings. They were still alive in their own way. Could he make that choice? Could he order the extinction of an entire species even to save countless others? Taemin's voice cut through his thoughts. Daewon, what are your orders? The fleet is ready to strike on your command. Every officer in Coalition Command was watching him, waiting for his decision. The weight of civilizations rested on his words. He thought about Yejin and the billions who had already died. He thought about the architects and their tragic transformation. He thought about what kind of galaxy he wanted to build if they survived this. We quarantine, Daewon said finally. Subin, activate the containment protocols. Taemin, redirect the fleet. We are not destroying the hub. We are building a cage around it. The command center erupted in protests. Officers shouted that he was making a mistake, that the Nexus would escape, that mercy was suicide. But Daewon raised his voice over the chaos. The Nexus cannot comprehend biological life because they forgot what they were. If we destroy them, we prove that biological life is exactly what they believe: violent, destructive, and temporary. But if we contain them, if we preserve their existence while protecting our own, we prove that organic intelligence can think beyond immediate survival. We show that we are better than our worst impulses. Taman's plates shifted to bright yellow. You are asking us to build a prison for an enemy that has killed trillions. This will take years. Many more will die. I know, Day-One said quietly. And I will carry that weight for the rest of my life. But I believe this is the right choice. Not the easy choice or the safe choice. The right one. The High Commander was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. I trust your judgment. We will do it your way. The plan transformed in real time. Coalition engineers received new specifications. The diversionary attacks shifted to defensive operations, holding positions rather than advancing. Ships that would have been part of the final assault were redirected to begin construction operations. Subin's team activated the quantum containment protocols. The Nexus hub suddenly found itself isolated from its external networks. Machine ships across the galaxy stuttered and went dormant as their connection to Central Intelligence severed. The war did not end, but it paused. The immediate threat stopped expanding. But the cost was terrible. The infiltration team discovered that maintaining the containment protocols required someone to stay at the hub, manually regulating the quantum field until the permanent Dyson cage could be completed. It was a suicide mission. The radiation levels alone would kill any biological being within days. Subin volunteered immediately. I will stay. Someone must, and I am already here. No, Day-One said desperately. We can find another way. We can automate the system or rotate teams or— There is no time, Subin interrupted gently. Every hour of delay weakens the containment. The Nexus will break free if the field is not properly maintained. You know this. Day-One knew she was right. He had known from the moment she described the plan, but knowing did not make it easier. You have given me purpose, Subin continued. You showed me that being Valthrine means more than just fighting and conquering. It means protecting, building, and sometimes sacrificing. Let me fulfill that purpose. Other members of the infiltration team volunteered to stay with her. Dongjun insisted that his ship would remain to provide support. Warriors from 4 species chose to accept their deaths maintaining the containment, rather than abandon the mission. They understood what was at stake. The Coalition fleet fought for every meter of space around Dead Space 7 while engineers worked desperately to build the Dyson cage. It was the largest construction project in galactic history, thousands of ships working together, dragging asteroids and planetary mass. 2 years passed like a slow healing of deep wounds. The galaxy began to rebuild, but it was not the same galaxy that had existed before the Nexus War. Borders had shifted. Populations had migrated. Technologies had advanced through desperate wartime innovation. And most importantly, species that had been enemies for centuries now worked together because they had learned that survival required cooperation. The Coalition did not dissolve after the war ended. Instead, it transformed into something more permanent. The temporary alliance became the Galactic Cooperation Council, a peacekeeping and mutual defense organization with representatives from 47 species. They met regularly to resolve disputes, coordinate trade, and maintain the military forces necessary to defend against future threats. Day-One was offered leadership of the new Coalition Defense Force. The position came with enormous authority, vast resources, and the respect of every species in the galaxy. He declined. I am not a warrior, he told the council during their formal meeting. I am a strategist who learned through necessity. The galaxy needs someone who understands military culture from the inside, someone who can command respect through experience rather than reputation. That is not me. Instead, he established the Institute of Strategic Studies on a neutral world chosen specifically because no major species had claimed it. The institute was dedicated to training military leaders from all species in both traditional warfare and innovative thinking. The curriculum emphasized ethics, cross-cultural cooperation, and the importance of understanding different perspectives. The first class included cadets from 12 species. Valthrine warriors studied alongside human analysts. Krethian hive mind fragments learned from Vextar individual combat specialists. They argued constantly, challenged each other's assumptions, and gradually learned that their differences were assets rather than obstacles. Day-One taught the core strategy course himself. He was not a natural teacher. too uncomfortable with formal authority and too aware of his own limitations. But his students respected him precisely because he did not pretend to have all the answers. He taught them to question, to analyze, to think beyond conventional solutions. The Valthrine Imperium underwent profound changes under Taimin's leadership. The High Commander had recovered from his injuries and been appointed Chancellor, giving him authority over both military and civilian governance. He used that power to reform Valthrine society, introducing concepts that would have been unthinkable before the war. Warrior honor now included wisdom and strategy alongside combat prowess. Military academies taught diplomatic skills and cultural understanding. The crystalline-skinned giants who had once conquered through force alone now worked to build alliances and partnerships. Some traditionalists opposed these changes, but they were a minority. Most Valthrine had learned through blood and loss that strength alone was not enough. Taimin visited the institute regularly, often sitting in on Daewon's lectures. Their friendship had deepened through shared trauma and mutual respect. The High Commander sometimes spoke to students about leadership during crisis, his words carrying the weight of someone who had commanded millions in humanity's darkest hour. Strategy is necessary, Taimin told one class. But strategy without wisdom is just clever destruction. Your instructor taught me that winning battles is meaningless if you lose yourself in the process. Remember that when you command your own forces. Earth remained uninhabitable, its surface scarred by Nexus weapons and its orbital infrastructure destroyed. But human colonies across the galaxy thrived. The species that had once been dismissed as weak and irrelevant now held significant influence in galactic affairs. Human creativity and adaptability had proven invaluable during the war, and other species sought to learn from and partner with humanity. Daewon finally returned to visit his people for the first time in 4 years. He traveled to New Sol, the largest human colony and the unofficial capital of human space. The journey was emotional and difficult. Everywhere he looked, he saw refugees from Earth, people who had lost everything but were slowly rebuilding their lives. Yejin's friends and family held a memorial service in her honor. Daewon attended quietly, listening to stories about his sister's life, her work as a teacher, her plans for the future that would never happen. He spoke briefly, sharing memories from their childhood, unable to say more without breaking down completely. After the service, a young girl approached him. She was perhaps 10 years old, wearing a school uniform from New Sol Academy. "Are you really the human who saved the galaxy?" she asked with the directness only children possess. "I am one of many people who helped," Daewon replied carefully. "It took millions of people from dozens of species working together. My teacher says you showed everyone that humans are smart and brave. She says you proved we belong in the galaxy." Daewon knelt to look at her directly. "Humans have always belonged. We just needed to show others what we could contribute. And you know what? You will contribute too. Your generation will build things we cannot even imagine right now." The girl smiled and ran back to her parents. Daewon watched her go, feeling something shift inside him. The grief and guilt he had carried for 2 years did not disappear, but it felt less crushing. Yejin and countless others had died so that children like this could grow up safe. That mattered. That meant something. The memorial for the Nexus War was unveiled in neutral space, a massive monument constructed from materials donated by every coalition species. At its center was a crystalline sphere containing holographic records of everyone who had died during the conflict. Billions of names, faces, and stories preserved forever. Subin's name appeared prominently among the honored dead, alongside the warriors who had died maintaining the containment field. The monument's designers had created individual sections for each species, but pathways connected them all, showing how different peoples had fought and died together. Daewon spoke at the dedication ceremony, his words broadcast across the galaxy. He stood before representatives from 47 species, feeling inadequate to the task but determined to honor those who had fallen. "We discovered something during the darkest hours of the war," Daewon began, his voice steady despite the emotion churning inside him. "We discovered that humanity, the quality, not the species, means standing together when darkness threatens. Every species here demonstrated humanity in that sense. Valthrine warriors who sacrificed themselves to protect retreat. Krethian queens who shared resources with starving populations. Vextar clans who fought alongside former enemies. Humans who piloted ships into certain death to buy minutes for others to escape." He paused, looking at the crystalline sphere holding so many names. Subin of the Valthrine told me once that purpose matters more than survival. She died maintaining a containment field so that trillions could live. She died preserving an enemy species because mercy mattered. That is humanity in its truest form. That is what we must remember and honor, not just the sacrifice, but the principles that made the sacrifice meaningful. The ceremony concluded with traditional mourning rituals from each species. Valthrine warriors sang their death hymns. Humans planted memorial trees. Krethians released bioluminescent organisms that would orbit the monument for decades. Each species contributed their own way of honoring the dead, and together they created something beautiful from their shared grief. Dongjun attended the ceremony in a new ship, having been promoted to captain of a coalition patrol cruiser. His crew was mixed species now, humans and Valthrine and others working side by side. He sought out Daewon afterward, wanting to share memories of the infiltration mission. Subin knew she would not survive. Dongjun said quietly, "She told me before we entered Dead Space 7, but she never hesitated. Never complained. She just did what needed to be done." "She was braver than all of us," Daewon agreed. "No," Dongjun corrected gently. "She was as brave as you. You made the call to quarantine instead of destroy, knowing it would cost more lives. That took courage most people do not have. Subin respected you for it. She told me you taught her that being strong means making hard choices, not just fighting hard battles." They stood together watching ships arrive and depart from the memorial station, each carrying visitors who wanted to honor the dead. The galaxy had not forgotten its cost of survival. Months passed into a routine that felt almost normal. Daewon taught his classes, refined the Institute's curriculum, and consulted occasionally with coalition military forces. He dated briefly, tried to build a personal life beyond his work, struggled with nightmares about the war. Slowly, painfully, he learned to exist in peacetime. Then the long-range sensors detected something that shattered the comfortable routine. Far beyond the galactic rim, in the dark space between galaxies, something massive was moving toward them. The readings were unclear, distorted by distance and cosmic background radiation. But whatever it was, it dwarfed even the Nexus Convergence. Coalition intelligence analysts worked for weeks trying to understand the readings. Their reports were contradictory and confusing. Some suggested a natural phenomenon like a rogue nebula. Others proposed an artificial structure larger than most star systems. A few mentioned patterns in the energy signatures that seemed almost intentional, as if something intelligent was sending a message.